Okay, thank you. Good morning, members and members of the Pensions Board, and welcome to this meeting of the Pensions Subcommittee. This meeting is being live streamed and the recording will be made available on the Council's website for public viewing. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their videos when you're not addressing the meeting. And should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write "speak" in the Teams chat function and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes, although we've never had a vote on the sub-pensions for a while, will be undertaken by roll call. And if any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or could you write "leave" in the Teams chat function and then join? This will allow us to monitor member presence of the Pensions Subcommittee of the 2nd of March. So moving on to the agenda items, we have item number 1, which is sediment apologies and the Chair's approval of members' remote participation for Pensions Subcommittee. So Tracy, have we got any apologies?
Thanks, Chairman. I haven't got any formal apologies, and we've currently got 7 members present on the Pensions Subcommittee.
Thanks very much. And I will approve remote participation for the Pensions Subcommittee. The next item is sediment apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation for the Pensions Board. Have we got any apologies for the Pensions Board?
No formal apologies either, Chair, and we've got 5 members currently present from the board.
Okay, that's fine, and I'll agree. Remote participation for the Pensions Board. Okay, members, item number 3 is declarations of interest for the Pensions Subcommittee. Are there any declarations of interest? I'll give you a bit of time for putting that up. Okay, and I can't see that. And any declarations of interest for the Pensions Board?
No.
Okay, thank you. Then move on to item 5 then, which is the external audit plan for 2021. This report provides members with an overview of the audit plan for the financial year ending 31st of March 2021. It's prepared by Grant Thornton, the Pension Fund Auditors. John Boyd, the Audit Director for Grant Thornton, this year's audit lead, is available to provide an overview of the plan and to take any questions members may have. John, have you got anything to add to the report?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of kind of brief points from myself. The draft plan is similar to the plan we've issued in previous years, with a particular focus on the valuation of assets, and will also be reflecting this year that the last triennial valuation was the 31st of March 2020. So as part of your disclosures, you'll have included within the accounts will be the impact of the triennial valuation. Will be the first time it comes through the pension fund accounts. Within our plan, we've outlined there's actually a revised accounting standard, ISA 540, and this is increasing the level of sort of focus and scrutiny that auditors have on areas of estimate and judgments and the disclosures in your accounts. So obviously a key aspect of our work is on those accounting estimates and judgment, particularly in the pension fund, in relation to the asset valuations and level what we deem as level 2 assets. And we'll have, areas of additional audit work within that. So you can see within our plan, we've outlined those areas of risk. The only other kind of aspect I would draw to the committee's attention is just in terms of our planning work and our materiality. So within our audit plan, we outline our planned materiality for the audit of the financial statements. Just to kind of sort of summarise what materiality is in relation to the accounts, it's what we would deem to be what the standards deem would influence the economic decisions of the user of the accounts. So if there was a misstatement in the accounts, what would be significant enough that the user of the accounts would deem to be material. So what we do for pension fund accounts is we apply a materiality to your effectively your kind of balance sheet or your funds statement, which is obviously high value amounts and the level of investments, and that's in line with how we would apply to all pension fund auditors and all pension fund audits and local government pension schemes. However, reflecting the fact that the fund's income and expenditure during the year and fund movements are at a lower level, we apply a lower materiality threshold to items such as contributions receivable and benefits payable. That's consistent with the approach adopted in prior year. We are in the process of just finalising, so the plan includes a kind of summary timetable, and we are in the process of finalising our plan. So there's some planning inquiries that are still outstanding, and we do some walkthrough and interim testing. Once that's complete, we'll look to finalise our audit plan and send it to members in a final version, and that will include our final proposed audit fee. Audit Scotland set out a baseline fee for all auditors, and once we've completed our final planning procedures, we'll then agree a fee with the officers and incorporate that into our final plan. There's nothing sort of coming out from our planning to date that would indicate that we wouldn't be applying the baseline fee, but just until we've actually got to that final process, then we'll agree that then with auditors. But nothing in the plan that's significantly unusual or different to previous years, really to kind of flag to the fund to the pension sub committee. But happy to take any questions you have on the plan or any comments even on it.
Okay, thanks very much. Before I open up to members, Paul, have you got anything to add?
Nothing to add at this stage, Chair. Pleased to hear John confirm, as expected, that the fee is likely to be no higher than the base level. But again, just like John, happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, members, any questions? Give you a bit of time. Okay, John Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. John's and Paul's just touched on it about the fees. I'm just wondering whether 3.5 should have been in the report document, because it's kind of misleading. It says that the fee for the pension fund for the audit is included in the plan document, which it clearly isn't, but we've obviously had the reasons why. I'm just wondering whether 3.5 should have been there at all. That's all. Thank you.
I think this is a due process, basically, John. This just happens every time we have an audit. But Paul, can you comment on that?
Yeah, no apologies, Councillor Campbell. It's right. When we initially drafted the report, the expectation or hope had been that we would have finalised the kind of fee discussions by the time we finalised the report, but that hasn't been the case, unfortunately. So apologies for that, and we'll certainly tidy things up and inform members once we get that detail through.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie. I hope you're not on silent.
Is that it?
That's it.
These gadgets, aren't you? Aye, it's just clarification, Chair. I heard John saying focus on scrutiny of judgment, and I see on page 12 the audit on the scope of our audit. The audit on financial statements does not relieve management and those charged with the governance of your responsibilities. And then I turn to page 15 on the significant audit risks, and on the paragraph beginning, our work focuses on critical estimates and judgments, and it goes on to say, in addition, we specifically consider valuation and, in brackets, investments and use of manual journals during the year. It's just clarification, John, and I did receive a reply from Paul on an issue that I raised, and I'll raise it in a further item of business today. But does this, your scrutiny, look at, policy of council in terms of where it invests, and whether you would make comment on that if it was contrary to perhaps some of the policies of the council in terms of ethical investment, or in other areas where the council sees itself, like in climate change.
Okay, John.
Thanks for the question. In terms of the scope of our audit of the financial statements, where we would look at policy is more around controls and sort of financial management. So an example would be if certain amounts were to be invested in a particular fund, and we didn't consider there to be appropriate controls in terms of the allocation of funds between fund managers, for example, that would be something we'd pick up. We wouldn't tend to focus when it comes to the financial statements on the types of investments. The only issue we would potentially, if we thought there was a significant risk attached to them, or potentially a volatility in the market that might impact or require a disclosure in your financial statements, if there was a valuation uncertainty, which was one of the areas that was flagged last year when it came to property because of the impact of COVID. Property valuations, the RICS guidance required valuers and fund managers when reporting the valuation of investments to attach a valuation uncertainty, just because of so limited data. So that would be the sort of aspect we would comment on, rather than explicitly commenting on a council policy as to what was a suitable investment, or what was deemed to be an ethical investment, because that is really a kind of a decision of the council, of the pension fund, and that's always a kind of a sort of challenge, because obviously you've got one interest is on ensuring the values of pensioners and looking after the valuations of pensioners and investment decisions of pensioners, but also then being essentially a public body, then making sure it's appropriate. But we wouldn't tend to really focus on that as part of our financial statements audit.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Willie. Jim McComb and then Stephen Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. A technical question, John. The period of appointment for external auditors, has it changed? I thought it used to be 5 years.
John.
Yep, so our audit appointment is normally 5 years. We're appointed by the Accounts Commission, and it's the normal period of appointment would be 5 years. Last year, the Accounts Commission and Audit Scotland made the decision to, because of the impact of COVID, to extend out the period of appointment by a further year. This was essentially to support audited bodies, given all the challenges with COVID and dealing with COVID. Taking on a new auditor can be quite a challenging process, because the auditor has to essentially learn all your processes and understand the organisation. So they felt that it would be appropriate to push that process out. I think it also helped. So the process of appointment actually goes through a full tender exercise. So that's obviously quite an extensive exercise for Audit Scotland to undertake. So I think as well, they were obviously under a degree of pressure with dealing with COVID and some of the delays that had on financial statements audits. So that the decision was taken to push that out. I think it's been communicated to all bodies that it would just be for the additional 1 year period. I think the actual contract allows it up to 2, but I think it's been confirmed it's only 1.
Thank you. A second question, John.
Yep.
Do we, as pension board, have responsibility to seek the best return for our members?
John?
This is in relation to ethical investment.
Paul, you want to come in on this one?
I'm happy to come in. Thanks, Chair. I think the council, sorry, the pensions subcommittee have got a responsibility to set the statement of investment principles and the investment strategy for the pension fund. The way what Jim just said in terms of the target is not quite the case. It is broader than that. The council does have a fiduciary and legal duty to seek to ensure that pension benefits are paid to those entitled to them as they become due. That is the kind of main underlying objective. But I think it's much wider than that now, and I think there's an increasing awareness and recognition that some of these wider investment considerations in terms of socially responsible investment and climate change issues are not opposed to or running differently to seeking to achieve financial return. And to a greater extent, these are influencing investment decisions for funds both now and going forward. Obviously, on the next item, or the next item on this agenda this morning, we're covering the Council's Climate 100 arrangements, and Ross will take us through that this morning. So increasingly, these wider considerations are being taken into account as part of setting investment strategies, and that's something that will continue through the board and through the subcommittee going forward.
Thank you, John. Do you want to add anything to it?
No, it's that's Paul's really covered it there. There is it's a kind of a balancing act between the various sort of the key drivers essentially in supporting your investment decisions. And I know from being involved in a number of pension funds, there's a mixture of kind of areas that need to be balanced in terms of what the pensions subcommittee and pension board's responsibilities are and areas of focus are. I know a common one's, looking at weighing up the options of local investments as well, and seeing whether or not that's an area of focus. But it's it's a kind of mixture of balancing those.
Okay, thanks very much, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. I was actually prompted to ask the question because of Councillor Scobie's and the response therein, and the further discussions kind of covered this as well, including Councillor McComb's question. But it's interesting just the role of the pension board in this, quite specifically, does include, assessing us as the pension subcommittee members in terms of we take the decisions, and the board seems to be responsible for ensuring that we are kind of in compliance with scheme regulations, etc. But also that the pension board would be quite within its rights, and I'm happy to be corrected in this, but to ask or monitor how we've invested according to principles such as the sustainability. Or whatever our investment strategy is. So I'm sort of thinking maybe that is clearly the role of the board to inspect how we've made decisions according to the policies that we have, or the council policies even, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in the next item. So I'm just wondering if governance could maybe clarify, because there's always been it feels like there's been a bit of a fudging sometimes between what the pension board does and what the subcommittee does, but maybe this is a welcome time to clarify that, and maybe each body can further those agendas in the proper way according to the governance. But could I maybe get a steer from the governance officer just in terms of that clarity? I appreciate it's not really to do with the audit specifically, so apologies for that. But just in terms of the debate that we're having.
I'm wondering whether it'd be better bringing it up with the emerging issues and all that, Stephen. But I'll ask Paul to come in on that just now. And
Okay.
it'll save a question later on, hopefully.
Yep, thanks, Chair. In response to the previous question that I referred to the statement of investment principles for the pension fund, and one of the specific objectives laid out for the pension board is to monitor investments and the investment principles strategy and guidance supporting that. So certainly there is a role for the pensions board in terms of this, but I mean, I think I understand what Councillor Thompson's saying in terms of, you know, we do operate jointly to an extent between the subcommittee and the board, and maybe there is a need for further clarification of the different roles in respect to that. So that's maybe something we can come back to members on. Certainly when the board was first established and in early meetings, we tried to set out, you know, the kind of clear distinction between the different roles, but you know, we do recognise that they do tend to operate jointly to some extent, and it may be worthwhile just revisiting those roles and making sure there's that clarity of purpose going forward. That's helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. Obviously, training for members is always pretty important, and you know, even if it's awareness of what the situation is between the board and the subcommittee. So I think that would be useful bringing forward. Stephen, are you happy with that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's no other members coming forward. So the recommendations is that we are asked to note the external audit plan for 2021. Are we happy to do that? I'll take that as a yes, thank you. The next item is item 6, which is the pension fund and emergency issues update. This paper is a regular item in which members are provided with an update on the current and emerging issues relevant to the pension fund, and attention is drawn to an update on the McLeod legal case and the cost cap valuations. Officers from the pension and finance teams are here to answer any questions members may have. Paul, have you or Ross, Fraser, have you got anything to add?
Just briefly, Chair, in addition to those issues that you referred to that are set out in the report, maybe just highlight to members that, as reflected in the report, we're continuing our gradual investment in the Blacklock Strategic Alternative Income Fund. We anticipate being up to about 45% of the agreed investment level by the end of the current financial year, and then the continuation of that investment. And towards the end of next financial year, we would hope to have the full £70 million invested close to that level by that stage. The other thing just to kind of pull out from the report is that we, as I mentioned at the last committee, we're currently undertaking the periodic review of our investment advisor arrangements. We have not yet got the kind of full procurement timetable in place, but once we do have that in place, the intention would be to shortlist a maximum of 4, but probably 3 potential advisors, and arrange a meeting of the subcommittee and board to allow members to have the opportunity to obviously influence and input those discussions, and to be able to question and discuss issues with the potential advisors. So that's something that once we've got that timetable finalised, we'll come back to members and get something in the diary to tell you that to be taken forward. But other than that, Chair, just happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Okay,
thanks for that clarification, and I think we will take you up on getting that sorted for the future arrangements. Members, are there any questions or comments? Ross, I never get so Willie. Willie Scobie.
Is that it?
I can hear you now, Willie. I see you now.
Sorry, Archie. Getting used to this headphone and then unmuting and everything. Aye, it's just that I touched on it on the previous item. And can I say, or rather thank Paul for his reply to a query raised by a constituent within Ward 1 on investment and strategy, whether indeed we do invest in fossil fuel companies. And in Paul's reply, and as I say, I'm grateful for his reply, it does say the choice is clear. We can choose to stick to the systems of investment that drive the profits of destructive businesses and keep accelerating the climate crisis, or we can invest local money in ways that ensure local workers not only receive a pension for their retirement, but also future worth retiring into. And in the second page, Paul refers to pension subcommittee is increasingly taking steps to develop funds responsible investment, environmental, social and corporate governance approach. And in the question that Jim McComb asked, Paul did come back and say it's about judiciary, legal responsibility, investing for best return. And again, whether it's appropriate for this item, or indeed Paul referred to item 7 in terms of climate change 100 plus, but whether we should be looking at where we are investing in fossil fuel companies, ethical standards and so forth, whether indeed it requires a further report. I seek your guidance on that one, Chair. But, you know, there is the issue that has been asked of me, and I think Paul refers to in his letter that we have influence as a member. Only wish that was true in some of the other committees, Paul, and it's good to hear that I have some influence. It doesn't always feel like it, but it's that whole question in terms of where we invest, and in this case we are being questioned on should we be investing in fossil fuel companies in terms of climate change.
Okay, Paul.
Yep, I think Paul come in on this as well, but can I maybe just highlight, I'm not sure if I picked Willie up quite correctly there, but can I maybe just highlight for members that the first element of what was being discussed there was from the query that came in from the constituent rather than from my response to it. The bits about, you know, the wider considerations and the role of the subcommittee, absolutely they were from the response, but in terms of some of the initial points, they were from the initial query itself rather than from the information we put back. But before I bring Paul in, I mean, I think as it did reflect in that response, I mean, more and more we're recognising that, you know, there is broader considerations in terms of investment decisions, and they're effectively aligned increasingly going forward, and that's what I tried to reflect in that response. And as we say, we'll come on to that a wee bit more in the next item on the agenda, but if Paul could come in at this stage as well, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
Paul,
yes, I am. I don't know whether you can see me, but I am here. It's obviously it's a very high profile issue at this meeting and at every meeting now, and at every pension fund that we go to. And just to pick up on one of the earlier points, to the extent that environmental factors and general ESG factors impact on financial returns over the long term, then committees are obliged to consider them and think about them and take them into account. And I think the whole environmental and climate issue falls into that category of every committee needs to be thinking about what they're going to do about it going forward. The fund does have investments in fossil fuel companies because it invests in what are called index tracking funds, which then by definition invest in all the companies in the index. So we don't have managers who actively choose to back oil companies individually, but we do have investments in oil companies. And one of the big items on the agenda for the strategy review that we'd be carrying out over the next few months is to what extent do we want to invest on a passive basis in indices that perhaps don't have that level of carbon exposure or fossil fuel exposure. So there's lots of options available within passive investment now that enable you to change the nature of the portfolio. So I think that needs to be a real sort of important core to the strategy review that we'll be doing in the next few months, because the bar is being raised. You know, it's not a passing fad. Everybody is having to get their head around how they want to approach this, and it will be a big feature of the way we look at the investments in the next sort of 3 to 6 months.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Will, are you happy with that?
Yeah, and just to back up what Paul was saying, it did follow, and Paul's reply did follow an inquiry made by a constituent, as I said in the beginning, that was questioning the fossil fuel investment, whether indeed we did. And Paul has just confirmed that we do invest in fossil fuel companies. And I think we need to look at that in terms of when we come to the recommendations for, and I think if I've got the name correct, Paul did say that he was looking at that over the next 3 to 6 months. I think we do need a report back to the pension subcommittee to see where that fits into our investment strategy and whether we should be continuing investing in those companies in respect of climate change issues. So I think, you know, it may need in the recommendations to look at that for a further report, Chair.
Yeah, I also think, Willie, that you know, with fossil fuel companies and oil companies and things like that, they are more and more investing in renewable energy as well, as opposed to just, you know, the fossil fuel side of things. So it would be appropriate, I think, to get a report later on. David Stainthorpe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just looking for a bit of clarification on the McLeod point 3.9, particularly where it says that there's going to be an administration exercise to look to identify members impacted. I wasn't entirely clear exactly whether what that meant, whether it's future impacts or whether it's historical impacts on people that have already retired.
Okay, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. My understanding is that the ruling relates to some protections that were applied to certain officers, and that may or should rather have been applied to a wider group. So it would be potentially beneficial for members rather than anything that would be to their detriment. But I don't know if there's anybody from the admin team that maybe could maybe go into more detail in terms of the nature of that review.
Stuart, are you coming in on this one?
Yeah, Paul, I'm here on that. So, yeah, the administration team are looking at some of the data and some of the information. As you've said, Paul, this would be seen to be of benefit to the workforce, and it also may extend to those people who have retired if they are covered by the period of time which the McLeod recommendations cover. So it is a project. It's going to be a fair bit of work that's involved. However, we've got all of the data available to us that we can use our systems in order to investigate what the likely impact will be on those individuals. We will then be taking steps to inform all those individuals where it does affect them to ensure that the various comms are put in place. And that's going to be something that will take a fair bit of time to do. We're in the same situation and position as everybody else nationally, and it could be a complex process, but nevertheless, we'll try and ensure that when we do contact the members that are affected by these decisions, then that the message is clear, it's concise, and that helps to inform the situation, because underpinning it is quite a complex set of changes that's being put in place.
David, you want to come back?
Yeah, just to follow up, please. Is there any need, Stuart, given the complexities you just mentioned, for any additional admin resources for the pension team, just to cover that specific area of work?
I think just in response to that, David, because of the nature of the work, it does require people like myself who have got the knowledge, and the team who have got that knowledge to be able to understand the rules and regulations and the changes, understands the systems and processes that we have in place. We are planning it within existing resources to make sure that we can deliver within the timescales that would be required. You know, I would never turn down additional resources, but in this particular instance, we need to ensure that the experts are dealing with it, and additional admin support probably isn't going to help us that much. It might actually be a hindrance. We'll use technology, David. We'll use the processes that we have and the expertise that we have to make sure that we deliver on it, which we have done consistently with these types of situations that arise over the years. If clearly, I'll report regularly to committee on how that project is progressing, and certainly if there are any additional risks that are arising in terms of the challenges, I'll be happy to share those so that we can have a further discussion on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just a couple of things happening in the chat side of things. Tracy, have you got that Phil McGrogan is in, and Councillor McClellan has sent his belated apologies.
Yes,
thank you. On that then, members, I can't see any further input, so we'll go to the recommendations. And we're asked to note 2.1, the update in relation to the implementation of the agreed investment strategy is detailed in paragraphs 3.1 to 3.4. 2.2, the current and emergent issues that will impact the pensions fund is details in paragraphs 3.5 to 3.16. And then 2.3, that further updates on these issues will be brought forward to future meetings of the subcommittee and the board as required. And within that, I would suggest that we look at the companies that are investing in fossil fuels as what is part of that report. Wally?
No, you just covered it, Chair. Thanks for that.
Okay. Everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. We'll then move on to item number 7, which is the Climate Action 100 follow-up report. And members at the December committee agreed to sign up to Climate Action 100 in the supporter role. However, also requested that a follow-up report be brought by officers detailing the difference between a supporter and a participant role. This report also provides an update on progress following the December committee. Paul, do you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Chair. Ross has been key to developing or supporting the development of the fund's approach in this area. So I'll ask Ross to kind of cover this, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you, Ross. On you come.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chair. As covered in the report, the fund was credited with supporter status following the December committee. We are now one of 6 Scottish funds involved with Climate Action 100 plus. In terms of the report, paragraph 3.8, where it says about the ensuring that all fund managers are deployed on its behalf, as part of the Scottish Asset Roundtable that the fund goes to, Lothian Pension Fund have offered support to help smaller funds such as ourselves to ensure that all fund managers are engaged in Climate Action 100 on our behalf.
Okay, I'm pleased to see they've offered that report. Members, any questions? I think with the discussions that we've had earlier on, obviously it's important to members that this is actually followed up on, and I think if we can use that support from Lothian, then we should do it. And we have David Stainthorpe.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at the recommendations in the report 2.3. It's talking to us to ensure that fund managers agree to sign up to the Climate Action 100 scheme, as described in paragraphs 3.8 and 3.9. But when you look in paragraphs 3.8 and 3.9, they're not quite going as far as that in terms of what they're asking the funds to do. And I just wondered how we were going to manage that, getting to the point of the where we're actually achieving the recommendation.
Ross, do you want
to? Yeah, thanks, Chair. Take that on. Well, I think it's as Paul Potter mentioned before, we invest in the investment managers, not the companies direct. So therefore, it is the fund managers who would need to sign up as the participant role, taking this on forward on our behalf.
Yeah, would you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. It's just I totally appreciate that, but the recommendation is that we get them. We're going to ask them to agree. So if it's really a matter of what we do. If for any reason any of them don't agree, because we're making a very clear recommendation there that they've got to agree. So there's that sort of slight difference between.
I think
principle and reality, perhaps.
With regards to that, David, that's obviously we would put a recommendation forward to ask our fund managers to agree to sign up. If they didn't sign up, then we'd have to come back and we'd make a decision on that. Paul, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we'll use increasingly going forward. So notice Paul Potter come in, so he can maybe come in and help me as well. But I think one of the things I would refer to is in paragraph 3.8 of the report, we will look to use our role as supporter to ensure that all fund managers deployed on our behalf I do agree to sign up to Climate Action 100 as a participant. So that's something I would intend that we make as a requirement going forward for all future appointments. So hopefully that helps to address that concern that David's raising. But I don't know if Paul maybe wanted to add something further to that.
Paul,
yeah, I mean, just to say it's becoming far more widespread that managers will sign up, but ultimately you may or may not want to use the sanction of moving your money if they refuse to do so. I agree that's a bigger decision that you're not necessarily making today. The pressure is on managers to sign up to this, but if push came to shove, you might need to make a decision to actually threaten to take the investments away. And you're not necessarily doing that today. I accept that.
Yeah, okay. I think at the end of the day, of course, we've always got to make sure that we have a profit for our members within the pension scheme as well, and that's pretty important, as well as making sure we have our climate action, policy within the council followed as well. Stephen, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean that's an interesting point from David Stainthorpe there, and I think there is something in that, but obviously we are in the process of looking at appointment of fund manager anyway, which is in the emerging issues thing. So as Paul was saying, maybe that when we're agreeing that, in order for it to be a meaningful agreement, I suppose there has to be something concrete in it, which is like if we determine that any fund manager must sign up to that when we appoint them, then that's that part sort of fulfilled. And then, of course, it's an issue about what investments they then choose to invest in, if they're pooled funds or whatever. And that's a more complicated question. But so I think there's something in that. But I know that generally across the council, elected members have been, contacted in recent times from, Friends of the Earth, kind of supporters and other people interested in ethical investments. And it might be helpful in the back of this, I wonder, to have a form of words that elected members can use that describes the way our pension fund is set up and how it invests. Primarily, as you said there, we have to provide a return for our members, which is kind of our duty. So balanced against that, though, these measures that we're taking to ensure that we're trying to invest responsibly, and that will include about fossil fuels, but lots of other businesses as well. So if there's a form of words that elected members could use to reply to some of the people who are concerned about this, because it's not quite as simple as we'd maybe like it to be, just because of the nature of our duties. So maybe that's something we could take forward through yourself, Chair.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty useful, because as you were saying, Stephen, there's more and more questions from people who are interested in investment funds and where their investment actually goes. So, Paul, just as part of the recommendations, and once we get to them, we could perhaps get an action from that, from yourself, to look at perhaps a message that members can use as a response to any questions that they have with regard to ethical investments in the pension fund. Would that be appropriate?
Absolutely, Chair. I think that would be helpful. The response that Councillor Scobie made reference to earlier on was really directed at providing members or with that kind of response, and it kind of summarises the main responsibilities for the fund, but the balanced way that we look at things and the increasing role of socially responsible investment and issues around that. So what we'll do is we can make that available to all members of the fund and the subcommittee to make sure they've got that. So if that would be helpful. I think the other thing to mention in this, can you still hear me, Chair? Yep.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to mention in this area is that following a recent discussion we had with the Chair and Vice Chair, Ross has approached Dougie Campbell, the Council's climate change champion, to basically make sure there's an awareness of the things that the fund is doing, and also to make sure that there's an opportunity for kind of influence and discussion going forward. So there's a number of developments here that we are looking at aligned with our overall responsibilities to the fund, and this is an increasing area that we'll bring further information back to members on as has been requested this morning. But certainly we'll provide that response to all members of this committee and board if that would be helpful.
I think that would be very helpful. Tom, Stephen, are you happy with that?
Yeah, very much so. Thanks for that, Chair.
Okay, Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Bearing in mind what has just been said about ethical investment and the following agenda item 8, would it be appropriate to include some carbon literacy training as part of our background training?
Okay. Paul?
Certainly it is an area that I think, I'm not sure of the exact term, but certainly this is an area where further member support and advice and training would be helpful. I think I'm right in saying, Ross will keep me right, I wasn't at the event myself, but I think a recent event that's referred to in the training report was focused on this area in particular. Would that be right, Ross?
Yes, there was an afternoon seminar which focused purely on ethical and social and governance training that myself and a couple of members attended. So that there is training available that we could roll out to members in this area.
Yeah, I think that would be useful, and it's part of the report later on. Perhaps we can get that as an action plan for moving forward.
I think, Chair, that would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Are there any other members who wish to speak? If not, then can we go to the recommendations? 2.1, we've been asked to note the progress to date following the December meeting of the subcommittee and board. 2.2, note the difference and implication to the fund between participant and supporter status. At 2.3, agree that the fund should use its role as supporter to ensure all fund managers deployed on its behalf agree to sign up the Climate Action 100 as a participant, as described in paragraphs 3.8 and 3.9, with the clarification that was mentioned earlier on. Are we happy to do so? And there is, of course, actions for later on in the training side of things. Thank you very much. And thanks, Stephen, for reminding us that the statement for members would be useful as well. Okay, so moving on then to item number 8 is the annual training plan and record of training update. This is a standing item on the agenda with an update on the training plan with COVID restrictions still in place. There has been limited training events since the last committee. However, events that have taken place have been carried out online, and all members are also reminded of the requirement to complete the pensions regulator training. I'll now open the floor to any questions, comments members have, unless Ross, you have anything to add?
Thanks, Chair. The only addition to the report is in reference to paragraph 3.5. The Baillie Gifford training has now, the link has now been issued. However, Baillie Gifford use a type of software that isn't always compatible with the council network. So I'm going to make sure that that is compatible before issuing it to all members following this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? John Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy with the annual training plan. I don't know if it's appropriate to maybe bring up, the membership, the makeup of the membership. I know there's been 1 or 2 people come off, the subcommittee and the board. I'm just wondering, normally the makeup's made through, political parties or the size of, political parties that come in. So I don't know if it'd be worthwhile having a review.
Paul, do you want to come on
that? I'm in the committee's hands really in terms of that. Happy to support what members are looking for. Apologies if I've not got the detail, but I don't know if there's vacancies at the moment, or is in response to vacancies, or is it just a general review?
Well, that would have been my next question, Paul. Would have been, are there any vacancies, and should we just populate those through whoever's group needs to populate? Maybe that's the way forward.
I think the vacancies were filled in after the last thing, and I think Willie and John Charteris, for instance, were taken on board. But I think if I'm open, members, if they want a review of the thanks Tracy for saying there's no vacancies. I'm open for if people want to have a review of the subcommittee and the participants of it, the members of it, then happy to do so.
Yeah. I suppose the only other thing I would add to that, Chair, is that obviously we kind of change of council coming up in a year's time. That is generally when we would take the opportunity to undertake a review of that nature. And also coming back to training as well, that's when, obviously we can do training, particularly in relation to the kind of wider investment considerations in the immediate term, but certainly we'd be looking for a larger approach, a more comprehensive approach to member training when we have that, the new council, and whether that changes the membership of the committee and board after that. So, if there's no vacancies at the moment, we would generally, unless members are minded otherwise, we generally wait until there is that kind of change in a year's time, if that would be helpful.
Okay,
yeah.
so and Tracy's saying there was amendments made last year when the group's amended in September 2020, John. So it's been a short while since the last one. So are you happy with just leaving it until the new elections out the way and we can get something sorted? I'm just thinking that there's going to be the new investment and things like that we'll need to decide as a pension sub going forward.
No, I'm happy that the subcommittee and the board's fully populated, and like Paul said, we've got council elections next year. It probably change anyway, so yeah, I'll leave it at that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, there's nobody else on, so can we go to the recommendations? The members are asked to note 2.1, the record of training plan for 2021, and 2.2, that new members and subcommittee board are required to complete the pensions regular training within 3 months of joining the subcommittee board, as detailed at paragraph 3.6. Okay, thank you very much. We'll then go on to item number 9, which is the 2020 actuarial valuation. Members were provided with a training update on the actuarial valuation at the last committee, and this provides members with an overview on the funding strategy statement and the ongoing consultation with participating employers. Paul and Ross are available to assist members with any questions they may have, unless you've got anything to add to it, Paul.
Just briefly, Chair, as you mentioned there, members have received previous reports in relation to the actuarial valuation. At the last meeting, there was a report and a kind of presentation from the actuaries. The kind of main headlines from that were that the fund remained at the 92% funded level, and probably the kind of key development subsequent to that is that, as reported to members as part of the budget process, it's been agreed that the council's contribution level will increase from the employer contribution level for the council will increase from 21.5% to 22% from the 1st of April. So that's one of the kind of main changes reflected in terms of the approach going forward. As you mentioned as well, the kind of key part of this report is the appendix. There's a lot of detail in there, so quite a technical document, but basically what it is, it kind of sets out the approach that the fund will take to ensuring that it will be able to meet its liabilities going forward, taking into account the need for stable employer contributions, but also taking a prudent long-term view to the approach. So that's really the kind of basis of the report and the appendix. But again, happy to answer any questions that members might have.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Just give a little bit of time because my acceptance of any comments is slow at the moment. I can't see any. So thank you for that. So moving to the recommendations then, we are asked to note 2.1, review and comment on the draft strategy from the strategy statement attached to the appendix, and 2.2, note that the proposed employer contribution rates in the draft funding strategy statement have been circulated to scheme employers for agreement prior to valuation being signed off on the 31st of March 2021. As detailed at paragraphs 3.3 to 3.6 in the report. Okay, I'm happy with that. Thank you very much. So moving on to item number 10, which is any other business deemed urgent by the chairman due to need for decision. I have no further business. However, we'll then move on to action, item number 11, which is consider the adoption of resolution to exclude the public from this meeting in terms of section 50A4 and paragraph 6 of part 1 and schedule 70 of the Local Government Scotland Act for a review of investment managers' performance for the fourth quarter of 2020. And of course, we have to come out of this one and go into another Teams meeting. Is that correct, Tracy?
Yes, Chair, that's correct. There's another Teams invite being issued for this exempt item.
Okay, so I'll give everybody sort of a couple of minutes to get out of this one and then move into the next one. Yep.